They tried to reduce her to pixels and comments. They thought they could shrink her spirit down to a headline, a screenshot, a cruel joke passed around in silence, and laughter that cuts. The internet is a vast place, loud, relentless, and ruthless. And somewhere in that digital storm was a girl. One girl. Alone, targeted, mocked, laughed at, dismissed. A girl who was supposed to break. But she didn't. She listened to the voices. Oh yes, she heard every word. But instead of letting them define her, she used them to refine her. She took the very pain meant to destroy her and turned it into purpose. They said she'd be forgotten in a day. She didn't ask to be a symbol. She didn't ask for the spotlight, the headlines, or the ridicule. All she wanted was a life. Her life. Her life. A quiet one, maybe, or maybe a bold one. But one shaped on her terms. And then the world, with all its unkind algorithms, decided to tell her who she was. They tried to name her, define her, reduce her. They threw words like knives and hid behind screens. But what the internet didn't know was that they weren't fighting a girl. They were waking a warrior. Because one girl, when anchored in truth, love, and grit, can do what billions of voices cannot. She can transform pain into power, and she can win. Not just for herself, but for every quiet heart watching, wondering, hoping. She stood, not because she had no fear, but because her spirit knew something deeper. That dignity isn't given by others, it's claimed by conviction. That no matter the volume of noise, her silence held more strength than their shouting. She didn't retaliate with venom. She responded with value. She didn't crumble under cruelty. She rose in courage. And when the world clicked, she stood unshaken. One girl, one heart, against the internet. And she won. She answered hate with healing. When the internet tried to shame her, she didn't return shame. When the crowd mocked, she didn't echo mockery. Instead, she turned to healing. Not only for herself, but for those who hurt her. She understood something most of us forget, that hurt people. And instead of becoming like them, she became more like herself. She chose to rise with softness, not because she was weak, but because healing is strength. She knew bitterness would only extend their reach into her heart, but forgiveness would cut their hold. So she forgave, not loudly, not for applause, but quietly, sacredly, so she could breathe again. And in doing so, she gave permission to others who had been bullied, ridiculed, or shamed to heal too. Her healing became a balm for thousands, and her response became a blueprint. You do not need to become the pain to overcome it. You do not need to mirror the darkness to escape it. She showed that the loudest resistance isn't rage, it's radiant peace. Her scars didn't disappear. They just stopped speaking the language of victimhood and started speaking the language of victory. Because when you answer hate with healing, you starve the hate and feed your freedom. They turned the camera into a mirror. At first, that camera was an enemy, a portal of judgment. A screen filled with stares, critiques, and uninvited opinions. But something powerful happens when you stop letting the lens define you and start letting it reflect you. She looked into that camera not to seek approval, but to see herself. Not the version the world demanded, but the version she was born to be. And in doing so, she turned every video, every photo, every post into a mirror. Not for vanity, but for visibility. So others could see what dignity looks like with a backbone. So others could say, if she can love herself with the whole world watching, maybe I can love myself too. She didn't hide the parts they called different. She highlighted them. She didn't erase her pain. She dignified it. And in every post, she took control of the narrative. She said, you don't get to tell my story? I do. She didn't perform. She stood present. And that presence was her protest. She reminded the internet that behind every screen is a soul, and behind her screen was a soul that refused to shrink. She gave her story a microphone, not a muzzle. Most people, when attacked, hide. They retreat, shrink, disappear, but not her. She stood in the fire and spoke. She gave her story volume, not to shout, but to shed light. She realized that silence protects shame, but speech releases it. She knew that the world can only weaponize what we keep hidden, so she laid it bare. so she laid it. And in doing so, she broke the chains that mockery tried to wrap around her identity. Her voice didn't tremble because it came from a place deeper than pain. It came from purpose. Her voice didn't seek revenge. It sought to reach. And she reached hearts that had never heard someone say, "You don't have to be what they called you." Her story became oxygen for those suffocating under judgment. Every time she opened her mouth, she tore down a lie about beauty, worth, and strength. Every syllable she spoke was a seed planted in someone else's barren hope. And her message was clear. You can be mocked and still matter. You can be misunderstood and still be miraculous. You can be a walking contradiction to what the world said was possible and still walk tall. She gave her story a microphone, and millions leaned in to listen. She won because she refused to quit. The world thought it was stronger. Louder, meaner, but it underestimated the quiet force of someone who just refuses to quit. Every insult hurled her way was a test, and she passed it by showing up anyway. Every attempt to shut her down only amplified her determination, because she didn't need the world's applause. She needed her own yes. She didn't quit on the day she cried. She didn't quit on the nights she doubted. She didn't quit when the voices grew louder or the silence felt heavier. She just kept walking, even with trembling feet. And in the end, that was the victory. Not that she silenced them, but that she outlasted them. She outlived the lie. She outran the ridicule. She didn't wait to feel powerful. She walked in power step by step, post by post, day by day. That's how she won. Not all at once. But in every moment, she chose to believe in herself more than she believed in their cruelty. Her win wasn't a trophy. Her win wasn't a trophy. Her win was her wholeness. It's her peace. Her purpose. Her presence. And now every time a girl somewhere is called a name or told she's not enough or mocked for her difference, there's one girl's story that stands as a banner of hope. She won. And you can too. They counted her out before they ever counted her in. They looked at her and thought they saw the whole story, tallied her worth by the number of likes, the number of followers, the number on the scale, the number in the scale, the number in the bank, or the number of people who approved. They thought if the numbers didn't line up, then she didn't measure up. But what they didn't know is that her value never lived in digits. It lived in her dignity. Her power wasn't in being counted. It was in refusing to shrink to fit their math. Because what the world calls a value, she redefined as a victory, and showing up when it was hard, victory in speaking when her voice trembled, victory in choosing worth when the mirror whispered and not enough. She didn't wait to be verified by a blue check mark. She verified herself in the silence when no one clapped. She validated her own existence by getting out of bed on the days her heart felt too heavy to lift. She reminded herself, I don't need numbers to prove I matter. I need truth. I need presence. I need purpose. She was not a data point. She was a divine point, placed here on purpose, with a purpose to shake a world obsessed with measurements. They told her she was too different, too small, too weak. But they forgot that it only takes one drop of water to start a ripple, and one girl to rewrite the rules. So she rose, not to be seen, but to see herself rightly. And that changed everything. The world screams louder every day. But be more, do more, show more. It attaches meaning to metrics. It tells us we must keep producing to keep existing. But she heard another voice, quieter, stronger. It said, you already are. Even when the world scrolls past, heaven sees you stand. She didn't let the numbers define her, because she already knew who had designed her, and the designer never makes mistakes. She wasn't made to go viral. She was made to go vertical, to rise above the noise, not to perform for it to be good. You see, numbers lie when you let them label. They told her she wasn't enough because she wasn't popular enough, pretty enough, powerful enough. But she had to learn that not enough is the seedbed where more than enough begins. Every time she looked in the mirror and saw lack, she spoke life. Every time the world said, approve it, she said, I don't have to. She learned to walk past rejection and toward redemption. She chose to believe that her voice mattered even when it echoed back alone. Because her value wasn't up for vote, it was rooted in something unshakable. There were moments she cried behind screens, when a number dipped or a cruel comment burned like acid on her skin, but she rose anyway, because she wasn't made to be reduced. They thought the algorithm could determine her identity. But she refused to be filtered, cropped, or coded into insignificance. Instead, she filtered her thoughts, cropped the toxic beliefs, and coded her spirit with truth. She began to understand that numbers may reflect data, but they never reflect destiny. She didn't chase influence. And she carried integrity. She didn't chase clout. She carried calling. That's what set her apart. She knew popularity fades, but purpose sticks. She knew trends change, but truth doesn't. So instead of comparing her chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20, she stayed committed to her page. One honest step at a time, and in that faithfulness she became more powerful than any metric could predict. She won't ever be the kind of person who needs the whole world's applause to keep going. She's not here to be understood by everyone, just to be obedient to her inner knowing. And the irony, the more she stopped needing the numbers, the more impact she made, because the world is hungry for real courage, real heart, real grit, and she didn't let the numbers define her value, because she refined what valuable really is. And maybe that's the message for someone listening right now. Maybe you stared at the numbers too long. Let them whisper shame into your worth. Maybe you've watched someone else rise and wondered if you'll ever be seen. Maybe you've mistaken silence for irrelevance. But hear this, you don't need a million to matter. You don't need a stage to be significant. Sad. You just need to stand, even if you stand in the shadows, because heaven sees faithfulness, not fame. You were never supposed to be a statistic. You were always meant to be a story, and stories take time. Stories take time. Stories take pressure. Stories take pages that don't make sense until later. But they're worth reading because they're real, and you, friend, are real. Don't shrink to fit a feed. Don't mold yourself to please a moment. You weren't made to be consumed. You were made to contribute. Your presence is not a performance. It's a proclamation. I am enough. Not because of what I produce, but because of who I am becoming. She didn't let the numbers define her value, and neither should you. The truth is, numbers will always change. They go up, they go down. But the light in you, that doesn't dim with digits. That doesn't waver with watchers. That doesn't quit when it's quiet. Your light was never meant to be measured. It was meant to be multiplied through love, through courage, through showing up again and again, even when it's hard. She didn't wait to feel brave. She acted in spite of fear. She didn't wait to be liked, to be liked. She chose to love herself first, and that's why she won. Not because everyone clapped, but because she kept going when they didn't. Her story won't be remembered for the numbers. It will be remembered for the noise she silenced. The lies she disarmed, the truth she lived. So to every girl who feels invisible, I see you. To every heart that's grown tired of trying to measure up, you don't have to. To every soul who wonders if showing up is enough, it is. You are not the numbers. You are not the comments. You are not the comments. You are not the views or the likes or the shares. You are the voice, the fire, the breath. The storm that rises slowly and then all at once. They used to say her brightness was too much, that her laugh took up too much space, that her words were too bold, her dreams too big, her confidence too loud for a world that preferred whispers. She heard it all. Tone it down. But shrink a little. But don't be so sure of yourself. And for a moment, a long moment, she listened. Not because she believed them, but because she didn't want to be left alone. She started to dim herself in rooms where her soul was meant to shine. She clipped her own wings because others couldn't bear to watch her fly. And yet, deep inside her, the light refused to go out. No matter how hard she tried to fit in, there was a spark that wouldn't stay small. She wasn't created to be a shadow. She was born to be the sun. And the day came when hiding hurt more than shining ever could. She realized she wasn't made to blend in with the background noise. She was a melody. She was the voice someone else needed to hear. Her presence didn't steal the spotlight. It lit the stage. And so, one small choice at a time, she started turning the dimmer switch back up. She started showing up in her fullness, her strength, her softness, her laughter, her flaws, her beauty, unfiltered, not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, but because she finally believed she was enough, just as she was. She didn't need to ask for permission to take up space. She stopped apologizing for being herself, and something miraculous happened. The world didn't end. In fact, it opened up. She stopped changing her truth to make people comfortable. And for the first time in her life, she felt free. Because the light she carried wasn't just for her, it was for everyone still stuck in the shadows. She knew now, shrinking doesn't serve the world, silence doesn't create healing, and hiding doesn't protect you, it erases you. She chose presence over approval, she chose boldness over blending, and she chose love over fear again and again. That's not arrogance. That's courage. She understood that people who are uncomfortable with your light are often battling their own darkness. That's not her responsibility to carry. She could shine with kindness. She could glow without gloating. She could radiate love and not be any less powerful. The truth is, being full of yourself in a world that rewards performance, that's rebellion. But she wasn't interested in applause. She was interested in freedom. She was no longer dimming her joy to protect someone else's insecurity. Her light didn't need to be justified. It just needed to be seen. She stopped performing strength and started living it. Not the kind of strength that never cries, but the kind that cries and still rises. She didn't wear confidence like armor. She wore it like skin. Real, imperfect, beautiful. She didn't dim her light in relationships where being powerful made others uneasy. She no longer twisted herself into silence to avoid judgment. Instead, she let her voice grow louder, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Because she knew the truth. Someone else was waiting for her to be brave. Her courage would become their compass. She had scars, but she didn't hide them. She wore them like medals. Because every one of them told a story of how she overcame, how she refused to be broken, how she stood back up when the world expected her to crumble. Her light came from the fire she walked through, not the applause she got afterward. She didn't know anyone's smallness in exchange for comfort. She didn't exist to be digestible. She existed to be divine. And that light wasn't just survival, it was sacred. It was sacred. Then she learned to walk into rooms as her whole self, not just the acceptable parts. She didn't wait to be loved before she loved herself. She didn't wait to be celebrated before she celebrated her journey. And she didn't wait to be understood before she told her truth. There was power in that. There was healing in that, and more importantly, there was legacy in that, because when she stopped hiding, she made it safe for others to be seen. Let them say she was a too much, too loud, too bold, too radiant. That wasn't a criticism, it was confirmation. Because people don't shrink what isn't shining. She became unapologetic about her dreams, about her pace, about her healing, about her voice. Not to make a scene, but to make change. Now every time she feels the pull to fade back into the shadows, she remembers the version of her that needed someone like her to go first. She remembers the little girl who was told to sit still, to stay quiet, to play small, and she answers her. With light, with love, with unshakable grace. She knows now that her light was never the problem. The world just wasn't ready. But she is. And she won't wait anymore, because there are people in this life who will always be more comfortable with your silence than your success, with your fear than your freedom, with your conformity than your creativity. But your job is not to make people comfortable. Your job is to be true, to be real, to be you, even if your voice trembles, even if your light blinds, even if they talk, even if they leave, because the ones who matter, they'll never ask you to be less. They thought they were breaking her. Every glare it blurred, every post typed behind the safety of a screen was meant to shatter her spirit. But what they didn't know is that she had something they couldn't touch. Hope. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream or throw punches back. It whispered. It stood still. It waited. And when everything else gave out, When her confidence wavered, when her hands trembled, when her knees buckled, hope didn't. Her hope stayed. That tiny flicker in her chest, fueled by something no one else could see, became her greatest weapon. She walked through rooms where no one saw her worth. She sat at tables where she wasn't invited to speak. She showed up in spaces where people were more interested in what she looked like than who she was. But even there, especially there, hope went ahead of her like a light. And hope has a funny way of attracting exactly what you need at exactly the right time. When the crowd booed, hope whispered, "You're still called." When the numbers didn't add up, hope sang, "You are more than they measure." When loneliness pressed down like a weight, hope wrapped around her like a blanket and whispered, "Oh, you're never alone." She never tried to pretend she wasn't hurt. She cried, she doubted, she questioned why the world made it so hard just to be herself. But what made her different was what she did after the tears. She got back up. She didn't need to be fearless. She just needed to be faithful to that flicker, to that voice inside that said, "You are more than enough." While others ran after validation, she chased purpose. While others got lost trying to blend in, she stood out again and again because she had hope, and hope will always shine brighter than hate. 1. Hope doesn't erase the pain. It carries you through. Hope never promised her an easy journey. It never said, "They won't talk about you," or "You'll always feel strong." What hope did promise her was this: you'll never have to go through it alone. She faced moments when it would have been easier to give in, to believe the voices that told her she wasn't beautiful, wasn't worthy, wasn't enough. But every time she leaned into hope, something powerful happened. She didn't become numb, she became brave.